I feel like feeling lost is kind of this underappreciated feeling. I feel like a lot of people have this idea that they have to kind of have everything, understood, and that everyone has to understand them, and they have to have this, correct path and strong moral compass. When I feel like that moral compass is something that should be challenged. If you're not changing anything about yourself, I feel like you're not growing in a sense, and you don't have to morally corrupt yourself or become, something or someone you're not. But I do feel like you have to experience change. You kind of have to become a newer version of yourself time and time again. I feel like too many people are stagnant on the person they want to be and the person they currently are. You have to be able to move past those things and to stop kind of focusing so much on the past. Even when you are looking at yourself with other people, how other people treat you isn't necessarily something that should determine, who you are as a person. When you're feeling, understood, feeling misunderstood, when people misunderstand you, it's not on you to explain yourself. You have to realize that within yourself, when you are talking to other people and you're trying to form your own connections, they're all guided by your standards, your rules. You have to be selfish in that sense, that you're going to use, all the things that are important to you, and you're going to be looking for the qualities that you want. When you're trying to have a successful relationship, it definitely determines, based off of how you are as a person. If you feel like you won't be able to, find this connection with someone else, or look for something new, then you have to move on from that. I feel like too many people have this idea that they can't have these own standards or can't have their own, kind of way of thinking when it comes to having a relationship, and when you're lost in that, it lets you kind of discover new things. When you're lost, it's more of a time for forming a new person, forming a new experience within your life. I feel like feeling lost can kind of be your superpower in that sense. It gives you something new for yourself. It's okay to feel lost because that gives you time to find yourself. When you are lost, you're kind of looking at all these things and kind of becoming a new person. And that transformation is definitely something that we have to experience. The people that don't get lost, the people that never change, the people that kind of can sacrifice these things for themselves, have to realize that that lost feeling, that period in your life where you're feeling like, isolation is the only way out, or that you have to do a certain thing to become someone else, is definitely very important. You should be kind of changing your own moral compass at this time. When you're able to kind of develop and become this newer version of yourself time and time again, you're not open to change. You're not attaching yourself to anyone or anything, but you're rather just focusing on the connection at hand, the connection with yourself, the most important connection that you're going to have in life. And when you are able to grow, when you are able to kind of experience these things for who they are, and what you want, you're now able to use being lost as a superpower. You're now able to use that thing to become a newer version of yourself, the version of yourself that you ultimately need. And that version is something that I feel like a lot of people are missing out on. So many people are scared of that feeling, that they kind of don't offer anything new. You have to get out of your comfort zone in that sense to experience something new. I feel like a lot of people have this idea that everything for them, is around them, when really I feel like you have to get out of your comfort zone, because the things that are actually for you are outside of that thing. When you take the steps to kind of talk to new people, or try new things, you're opening yourself up to a whole new different world. How are you going to kind of venture out and travel on a new world if you've never left your planet? How are you going to see if everything out there in the universe is for you and you're staying on this same place, time and time again? I feel like a lot of people get so caught up on this, fear of becoming someone new, or fear of not being fully aware of themselves, that they don't let themselves change. You have to realize that doubt kills, anything more than failure ever will. You have to stop doubting yourself as much. You have to be able to be, more confident. If you can give all these other people in your life, so much confidence and so much effort, and kind of put them on this pedestal, why not put yourself on that pedestal? Why not for once feel like you can be and do whatever you want? Because truthfully, you have the ability to change and to improve every day, and you get to do those things. You get to wake up, and decide the person that you're going to be that day. And I feel like if we give ourselves more time, more leisure to really express ourselves, we'd see that a lot of times we're doing these things that we know will hurt us, but we're doing them anyways because we're so used to it. You have to kind of break that pattern in a sense. When you are breaking that pattern and kind of becoming someone new, that's ultimately what it means to change, to grow. And that growth is what so many people are missing out on. I feel like if we want to grow better, if we want to have, more things in the future for us, if we want, a deeper connection with ourselves, we'll realize that when we are lost, this now can open something up for us, to kind of change, and that changes. I feel like so many people are scared of change. I feel like it can feel like such a big word. It can feel like such a, big thing that kind of takes over, and I feel like that change is something that I've been scared of. I've been scared of trying new things, or expressing myself, or even doing things like this, talking to a camera, and opening myself up, and being able to kind of put yourself, in front of the eyes of hundreds of thousands of people, you know, breaking that silence, kind of breaking out of that mold is what we have to start challenging ourselves with. How do you expect for anything to take off? How do you expect for any new growth to happen if you're doing the same thing? If you're working out and you only do the same exercise with the same weight every single day, how are you going to expect any growth? How are you going to expect any change? If anything, the only thing you're doing is conditioning yourself to saying that, okay, this is my max. This is all I can do. This is all I'm capable of. And you're hurting yourself when you do that. You're putting yourself down, because not only are you not giving yourself the confidence, but you're not giving yourself the chance. Why are you kind of getting rid of yourself before even letting yourself, try these things? In order to be good at anything, you have to fail. You have to fail big. And I feel like failing is one of the most underappreciated things we can do in this world. When you fail, when you try, when you have the opportunity to do something and you try to do it and you fail, that is when you should be the most proud of yourself. Failing is a flex. I failed at doing this thing, so this means I had the opportunity to do it, and I'm going to try it again until I get it right. That failure is something you need. You keep kicking yourself down, before even giving yourself the chance to shine. Why are you getting rid of yourself that easily? You have to stop doing that to yourself. You have to be more confident and more successful. Stop putting yourself down before letting yourself rise. Before letting yourself, become this person, or try these new things. You're so negative with your self-talk, the way you view yourself, the way you talk to yourself. You have to realize that that's only hurting you in the future. If you had a friend that talked to you the way you talk to yourself, would you want to be around them? That's something you have to ask yourself, because if you're telling yourself that you're incapable of these things, or that you're unlovable, or that you'll never have these things, this is all rooted from an insecurity, from your flaws. And you have to realize that those flaws make you the person you are today. You are able to change as soon as you are able to accept that these things affect you, and now you can change without them. Now you can be someone who doesn't include these flaws, but includes, their strengths, the things that are important to them. And when you are doing that, you're capable of growing in that lost era. That lost part and arc of your life is the most important. This is the time where you're focused on yourself so much that no one else should be an issue. No one else should be kind of coexisting or colliding with what's important to you, but rather you feel confident with who you are and what you want in life. And I feel like if we gave ourselves more time in that, period, in that acceptance, in that kind of, we're so scared of feeling lost that we get out of feeling lost and immediately attach ourselves or cling ourselves to something. We realize that when we are alone, when we can face being alone, when we can face feeling lost, defeat, failure, all these things by ourselves, we now let ourselves grow. That is when you are supposed to be experiencing life. That's what it is. Life isn't living without any problems. Life is capitalizing and moving forward. Life is perseverance. Life is change. And that change is something you need to have. I feel like so many people are so scared to even fall into these negative pits, or to fall into these things that might hurt them. You have to realize that hurt is what you need. That hurt is going to change you. You should embrace the hurt. Embrace that feeling. It's better to feel everything at 100% than to feel nothing. You keep getting on yourself for having a big heart, or getting on yourself for feeling, so deeply for these people that don't feel for you, when really that is the thing that separates you. That is the thing that now invites you to meet people, form connections that are going to be so much more deeper and so much more stronger, because you're able to feel these emotions. You're so much more confident in yourself now because you have so much love stored within you. That love that you're actively looking for, look for it within yourself. You're exuding it every single day, and yet you pass it up so often because you feel like it has to be, received romantically by someone else. You could be receiving that love, by yourself, platonically, through anything, through your interest. When you are expressing that love, you're actively inviting it to come back to you. Now, that is the law of attraction. If you want to feel better about these things, then feel better for yourself first. Feel better and understand that you are capable of these things. Nothing has deteriorated you or destroyed you or put you off of the path that is already made for you. You should feel more confident within yourself in that sense. Feeling lost is really something that I wish more people felt. If we kind of put down all the pride and put down everything and said, wow, like, I'm feeling kind of lost with my life right now. That's when you put the pen to the paper and start to change. That's when you start to become something new. That's when you start to kind of be reborn and be the phoenix that rises from the ashes of your past failures, your past mistakes. If you can't move past those things, if you can't appreciate anything new to even happen, how do you expect yourself to be this new version of yourself, to be this new person? I feel like being that new person is really what you need in life. That's what's going to separate you. Try to be someone new. Try to build on yourself, build on the past or everything you've dealt with, but focus on the possibility of becoming someone new in your lost transition, in your lost era. Because feeling lost is what keeps you human. That's what keeps you grounded. If you didn't feel lost, then you wouldn't be experiencing life. You wouldn't be human. You wouldn't be anyone. Those people that haven't experienced that or haven't even challenged themselves to look at themselves in the mirror, to try to be someone new, to try to change as a person, they're stuck. And it's so much better to be lost and question these things than to be so unaware and oblivious to it. And I feel like being oblivious can be so powerful that it kind of ruins you. It's better to be so self-aware. Being self-aware isn't an issue. That's not something that's going to deteriorate or destroy you at all. You have to realize that. Being so self-aware is something that you need to have. I'd rather be so much self-aware of these issues or these problems that are at hand than the things that are, not affecting me. If you can focus on these things that are an issue and kind of use this anxiety and turn it into awareness, turn it into the possibility of becoming something new, focusing on yourself, focusing on what's important at hand, you have to realize that your awareness now is something that you need to have. I'd so much rather be self-aware than to be oblivious to the problems that I'm already facing. The things that I am unaware of now have the ability to change or kind of put me off of my path because I can't even see them, because I can't even focus on them. As soon as you start to let these things kind of control you or blind you, you have to realize that you're no longer unaware of it. You're kind of just overthinking. You have to cut out all the what if questions and scenarios you have in your head. You have to just accept that what's happening now. Stop focusing on the past and the future and appreciate the present. Appreciate what you are experiencing, so that way you can have, better connections. You can have a better life, not only for yourself, but for the people around you. And when we're looking to have that better feeling, we're looking to have more for ourselves, that comes out of feeling that lost feeling. And we have to appreciate that. And I think so many people have this idea that they don't want to, so they don't even try to. Appreciate the feeling of being lost.